Hello, Hockey World. How are you doing? Before we get into the show, we're going to be talking today about the Montreal Canadiens and Pittsburgh Penguins, which will for sure be something that we all agree on profusely. So
I'm sure.
Before we get to that, Mike has something he'd like to say.
Yeah, I just Jan and I are big baseball fans. I know I'm not including you, Ek, because I know you're not.
I don't hate baseball.
I know.
I played baseball. I was on the Atlantic Little League World All-Star team. I went to the Little League World Series, not like far, but I mean, we went to the States.
You hate it.
I watched every Phillies game in the Larry Bowie and Boa Manny trio era. I was a huge fan of them for years. I watched almost every single game. I don't hate baseball. I think it is far, far less interesting than hockey to watch.
Well, okay. That being said,
on that note,
anyways, I don't hate baseball. I hate basketball. If you want to bring up basketball, I do hate basketball.
The major league players came out with a proposal of a 114 game regular season that would have extended the regular season into the end of October, and then playoffs in November, which is a little bit cold in November. And God forbid if there's a spike, if there's a spike in COVID-19, it's probably going to happen in October, November, December. So that was a plan that didn't fly with the major leagues. Jan and the owners came out with their counter proposal today, and it was 50 to 60 games. This is such a ridiculous battle because right now it's the players want to grab as much money as they can. That's why they're trying to play 114 games in 120 days and basically telling the Major League Baseball to F off when it comes to the playoffs. At least that's my interpretation. Yeah. And here the owners are saying, here, we're going to give you 1/3 of the prorated salary, and we want the playoffs where we make the money. I don't know if they meet in the middle. I'm not optimistic right now.
Yeah, I don't know how you could possibly think that they could survive with 70 games. It doesn't seem like nearly enough.
What do you think, Jen?
So, I mean, clearly the playoffs is the goal, right? The regular season and a bastardized regular season doesn't really matter, right? That's very clear. It's interesting that Andy Martino, who used to write for the Daily News, still shows some optimism that they could reach an accord. So, you definitely have two polarizing views. There is certainly a wide swath of ground to meet somewhere within the middle, but as time continues to move on, finding that middle ground becomes more and more difficult, right? Maybe they do need an end date. The only positive that seems to be is the protocol associated for health and safety seems to be that they're on the same page, right? So if you can put that piece together, which we saw from the NHL what that might mean, right? And we saw the 67-page document that kind of came out. If we can get to that level of agreement, at least that removes a somewhat clearly significant obstacle where now you have to kind of agree on a salary and everything else. And the problem is the language that was used on the original agreement when they took the in March, or when they came up with the, hey, we're going to give you X amount of dollars, the viewpoint was going to be, was that a final agreement? Was that still subject to modifications? One side says yes, the other side says no. And we're stuck in the middle now with two sides who are millionaires and billionaires arguing with one another, which clearly in the public eye doesn't look particularly good, especially given that we have how many millions of people unemployed and looking for jobs right now.
Well, Ek, this is the thing that I thought made the least amount of sense. If it's 55 to 60 games, or 50 to 60 games for the major leagues, that would be equivalent to a 27-game regular season for the NHL. If they had a lockout or something, there's no, at a certain point you would say, okay, it's not even worthwhile to play the regular season. I don't think
the math that you're saying, Mike, but it's really not the same thing. I mean, you're still playing. I mean, 27 games is 27 games. It's like no matter how you slice it, 27 games is less than 60 games. You know, percentage-wise to what they normally play, I see what you're saying, but that's not. I mean, still, you're not looking at like if they can play, I don't know, 50 games.
I think they need to play at least 70 up to 80. They have to play half a season. And if you look at the 114 and say 60, then 81 or 82 is right in the middle, and that's probably where they'll end up meeting at the end of this. But get to it. I mean, I think they have as little as probably 2 or 3 days before, maybe the end of this week, Jan, before they say we can't do it, because they have to get to spring training again by, say, the 10th of June and get playing by the 1st of July. And if that doesn't happen, then I think it's done.
Yeah, I mean they need to come up with some form of an agreement, as you said, Ek. 20. What I've heard is, if you think about it, right, if you're going to do that short of a span of games, in essence, you're going to probably have to have every team make the playoffs, then have a race for the teams to get in there. You can't just do your normal playoff because that's insufficient. Think about Dodgers just gave up an inordinate amount to get Mookie Betts.
Yep.
You now play 50 games, you can get off to a slow start, and somehow, based upon the playoff positioning, you don't make the playoffs because you've only played 1/3 of a season. How well do you think that's going to play with a team like that? That's one of the big money teams in the league, right? So you need to have some sort of a realistic regular season to at least establish who's going to make the playoffs. I mean, when we had the strike in 95, they played 144 games, which was much more representative of a season in terms of cutting down, because years ago you only had 154 games before you went up. So even 80-something is not necessarily a great option, but it's better than nothing. My view is I thought as 100 was kind of the baseline, and then you move forward from there to try to establish, at least with 100 games, you have a realistic representative sample of a normal regular season to move forward into some kind of a playoff option.
And if you think about it, Ek, if you think Vegas got screwed with Robin trading for an expiring contract like Robin Leonard, who I think played 2 games after the trade deadline, just think of Betts with the Dodgers, or Marcus Stroman with the Mets, or JP Realmuto with Philadelphia. All those contracts, because they're allowing these contracts to elapse, all of them expire if they don't play this year. So they basically traded prospects and good prospects for nothing. So, I mean, I think they have to get this season in, but I don't know if these two sides will come together. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it would be hard to imagine that they don't, but anything is possible. It would really be very disappointing. It would really definitely play into the baseball stereotype of a spoiled group of people. Like, if they can't figure this out, like in some way, shape, or form. I mean, considering what's going on with hockey, and I was talking to Jan about this just today on the phone, just a little bit ago. But what's happening with hockey is, basically, from what I'm telling you, the owners are the owners and the teams are so appreciative that the players are willing to do this, that they're basically saying, is when it comes to like the things that are still debating, like best of 5 versus best of 7 series, whether it's brackets or not brackets, they're basically saying to the players, tell us what you want, and that's like, to me, that's a totally different way of looking at it, than what we have going on here.
Yeah, but they're see, that's the thing. That's the one good thing about this current CBA. They're partners. They're locked into this. I mean, in baseball, there is no salary cap. The players are looking to get as much money as they possibly can. In this instance, with the NHL, these two sides, the PA and the owners, they're partners in a 50-50 split. And if there's $1.5 billion loss if they don't play playoffs,
right,
the players are going to get hit with that when escrow comes around. That's why there's probably going to be a new CBA that will spread out the losses over 6 or 7 years. But I mean, it's not guaranteed, but you've heard enough talk about that from Kevin and from guys like Pierre Brun and Elliott and other people that seems to be within the realm of possibility.
It makes sense. It makes sense for them to do that. Honestly, it really does. So let's get going into the show here. We're talking hockey already anyway. Here we go. Tuesday, June 2nd. Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, the 2nd of June, 2020.
I'm Michael Agello, and it's a balmy 62 in Buffalo.
I'm Jan Levine, and it's slightly warmer down in Long Island.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It's the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we are going to start today looking at some of these fascinating series that we're going to see. There's 3 things I'm going to be doing in my blogs, and then we're going to be reflecting in the podcast over the next several weeks. One will be going through all the series that we have to go through, which is going to be fun. The play-in series, you want to call them. The prequel to the Stanley Cup playoffs, or however you want to do it. But I would say that's one. The other thing we're going to be doing tomorrow, we're going to be looking at teams who are out of it and what they have to do, what they if you're looking to do tomorrow. We're talking about Buffalo because we're going to have Joe Yearden on the podcast tomorrow. So we're going to talk about the Buffalo Sabres and what they need to do. And the other thing I'm going to be doing is looking at the top 4 teams in each conference and how they would like this to play out. Like, basically, do they want to finish in first, second, or third, or fourth? Who would they like to play? That kind of thing. So that's there's a lot of fascinating things about that as well, because there's we talk about these games they're going to play ahead of time, and what does it behoove a team to maybe not finish first in that situation, since there really is no home ice advantage. First, I wanted to start off with saying that my idea was stolen by the Japanese baseball thing. Did you see this? that there actually is an app now that you can talk to, and your voice can be heard in the stadiums where they're doing in baseball. To actually have your voice be and there's on the app there's like buttons you can press if you want to boo or cheer or whatever, and the more buttons are pressed, the louder the cheer is in the stadium. I think that's a great idea, and I think the NHL needs to pick up on it. I've said it before, but
yeah, they better have some sort of guard against swearing or obscenity, because I know that some people will take definite advantage of that. Maybe the 20-year-old Mike probably would have if it would have gone back 30 years or so.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think although some of the things that they can do to get around that, like the Japanese app has, if you don't want to have their voice actually being heard, it's just the concept of like a button pressing, like having like on your app like 10 options in front of you. I want to boo this. I want to start a chant. I want to do this. I want to do this, and you press those buttons, and those buttons are in your computer and it reacts, and that's how the sound is. I think stuff like that is better than doing
than cardboard cutouts
or a DJ
or DJ.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Did you hear about the sex dolls thing?
Yes,
that was crazy.
That was the one in the crowd originally.
Yeah.
They had 15,000 sex dolls in the crowd.
Yeah, they did. They were ordering lifelike they wanted lifelike people, so they ended up ordering things. They didn't realize they were ordering sex dolls. So of course they had like a little bit of a different expression on their face than they.
It was a new giveaway night the next time the fans were in the crowd.
Yeah, new giveaway night. Yeah, they're not saying.
And by the way, can I say one thing on the top four?
I was going to say Jenna Jameson just made $1 billion.
They were all just
saying, so are you a little surprised that Boston didn't push back a little bit on this? Because I can understand spots 2 through 4 because they were so close.
Yeah,
getting having a shot for movement within those three spots, but Boston having a 10-point lead, which couldn't be exceeded unless you played several games and then lost all of them. Right. I'm a bit surprised they didn't just have Boston have the ability to be the number 1 and 2 through 4 be up in the air, while the West Coast, because it was so close, there you could see some migration and movement among the top 4 teams if they go with this round robin type of tournament.
Yeah, exactly. I think you will see some movement with that, and I think that we're gonna see a lot of things change. I did talk to some people who said there is a possibility that we could see if the awful stuff that's happening in our cities continues, or if it escalates into flat out armies fighting people in the cities, that we could definitely see something that ends up with Canada getting if not one then both markets, because that obviously doesn't matter to the Americans. I know there's been some protests in Toronto as well, Mike, but they are in all cities around the world there's little protests, but none of them have, of course, come close to what we're seeing in the U.S.
Yeah, I'm not diminishing the situation and everything that's going on, but we've seen with the riots in LA and after Rodney King and other Trayvon Martin and other instances, it happens for a week and then it starts to dissipate, and this has been longer than I expected.
Those are definitely way bigger than those.
Yeah. I really think, and maybe I'm wrong here, I really think a contributing factor to this has been 3 months of being pent up in houses and being sequestered.
Yeah. I think that, and there's no question that plays into it, and also just people being unemployed because of it too as well, and people being angry and hurting for money, and then also just the fact of crap, man. Anyway.
Spilled the take a boost all over yourself?
Oh, no, I got it. I figured it out. So I just went on a hike with my son, and I picked this tick out of my head, and I put it on the ground there. I put it up here on the table. Now it's gone. One of those feelings like, oh, fantastic. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's somewhere else. Okay, so moving on. I think that what's happening here is very different than anything we've seen since probably like the 60s and riots and things like that from race. This could go for a couple months. It's not out of the question. I know mostly it doesn't, but it is definitely something that has to be considered for sure. All right, so here we go. That is Mike in the chat room. Mike, you want to?
Oh yeah.
Mike, you cannot text me something like that.
Sorry, no. Somebody asked me where's my Sabres hat. I'm like, okay.
Anyway.
I don't wear any hockey hat. That would be showing some bias. I'm a professional reporter. I am not a fan of any team.
Yeah, right. Okay. I rarely believe that one, Mike.
In the chat room here, Mike can also text.
You can be a fan and still be objective, right? Those aren't mutually exclusive terms.
I was expecting that reaction from Ack, Jan. Come on.
This is not, but when you text something like that anyway. All right.
I apologize.
Remember that Peli Eklund in the chat room could be Mike.
It is me. I take all responsibility
for that particular one.
For that particular one. There you go.
All right. Anyway, I was trying to help you out earlier in the chat room. All right. Anyway, so here we go. Okay, so let's move on to hockey because we all have plenty of stuff we all know what else is going on in the world. We don't need that. Talk about that anymore. For now, our prayers with everybody, and hopefully everything somehow works out. I don't know how.
So do you want to go into the Penguins?
I went to Montreal and Pittsburgh because this is a series. So what I did last night, and I think I encourage you guys all to do this again, and maybe we could all. I even thought we could do a live stream of this. They're fun. I actually watched the condensed games of all three condensed games of these teams. Now, and I watched the first one in its entirety, and then I watched the next two in condensed. And I thought about watching all three of it in its entirety, but that is a lot of the Canadiens Penguins. So anyway, a couple things in general. What happened when these teams played this year? And they met in three different time periods. They met in November, at which point there was no Crosby on the Penguins. He was hurt. I'm sorry. Let me bring the games up. I actually have the games. They met in December, January, and February. That's when they met. Sorry, 3 months. Okay. Yeah. So the first game in December and the game in January, no Crosby for either of those games. The first game, the Montreal Canadiens won in Pittsburgh 4-1. And it was it was interesting in that game. If you remember, that game was kind of famous because Tristan Jarry, who was in, had two shutouts going into that game. Remember, who was riding the streak, and then, that streak ended up being beaten by Tatar in the second period, and it ended up like 177 minutes, where he set the record for the Penguins' longest shutout streak. Mm-hmm. That was that game. So it was kind of a historic game. We kind of talked about it at the time. I remember that. And there was also the first game that Barber, who played for the Canadiens at the time, would play against the city he grew up in, which was Pittsburgh. So anyway, there was a couple of fun things happening in that game.
Riley Barber, okay.
Riley Barber, yeah. So but what I really noticed about this game was two things. One, I noticed that the Penguins were, Carey Price was really good. He was really good in this game. He was really calm. He was very relaxed. He also was incredibly good at controlling his rebounds, which is important when you have a defense like yours and you're going against Penguins. Like his rebounds were very much, he doesn't have the best defense. He's going against a tough team. Even without Crosby in the lineup, they still, Gensel was really good in this game, as was Rust. Rust had a really kind of like an under, his season was way better than people realize. I think Rust's season was incredible. He had a definite coming out season where he became more than just a third, fourth liner type player. Brian Rust was great in this game, and he was great actually in the series in all three games against Montreal. He was one of the best players for the Penguins.
Well, he had his career year, Rack. I mean,
he did.
He was second behind Malkin in scoring. His career high 27 goals, 56 points. So he had a big year for them. Yeah. So
a lot of that coming early though.
Yeah.
Remember, he did have a dip in terms of a drop in production, and then he ramped it back up again.
He did for sure. And so there was a lot of fun things about this game. But what I really noticed, the overall thing was the Penguins trying to aim their shots a little bit too much because Price was in such good position and Price was covering his rebounds so well that the Penguins missed the net with a lot of shots. Like there were a lot of missed shots, and you always see that when you're going against a goalie that's really good and you're a team that feels like they have to not just put it on net but like actually pick your spot. And that Price kind of got in their head in this game. Jarry was really good in the first period. The Canadiens, the Penguins scored first like right away. Gensel and Rust basically had a 2-0, and then from that point on it was 1-0 Pittsburgh until there was like 5 minutes left in the second, and then the Canadiens scored 3 goals really quickly. And one of them was like a really incredible like end-to-end rush. It ended up in a stuffer by Shea Weber that was just like, wow, where did that Shea Weber? Like I haven't seen that Shea Weber for a while. That was fun. That was a fun thing to watch. So that was game number 1. And the one thing I noticed in that game was that Penguins' speed against the Penguins' defensive speed was not up to snuff with the Canadiens' offensive speed. The Canadiens' offensive speed was definitely guys like Suzuki, and Lehkonen especially. These guys were really having their way, and Domi. They were really having their way with Pittsburgh's defense. The Penguins' offense should absolutely dominate, of course, the Canadiens' defense. So the second game is January 4th, a month later in Montreal. This game, Matt Murray's in goal for the Penguins. And, reading that, when I went to the game and I was looking on YouTube in the comments, there were several people who said this was maybe Matt Murray's best game of the season for the Penguins. He was really good. He stopped like 38 shots in this game, including and Lehkonen actually scored both goals for Montreal in this game and had a chance to tie it because the Canadiens, the Habs had a 2-1 lead going into third. Lehkonen was on a break. It was 2-2 in the third. Lehkonen was on a breakaway, and Murray made an amazing save. Well, Lehkonen could have gotten a hat trick and given the Habs the win. Mm-hmm. But instead it went to overtime. Where Tanev scored in overtime, and which is another kind of famous thing on the internet where Tanev's like getting yelled at by the Montreal fans or whatever. But yeah, and that whole play was on a bad change by Suzuki in the 3-on-3 where Suzuki made this horrible change. So you saw like the young Habs making mistakes there. You saw what you're going to say, which I think is kind of interesting. But Matt Murray was amazing in this game, and Price was again amazing in this game. This was really like there was like a hot for being like a 2-2 regulation game. This was tons of excitement and tons of opportunities in this game. And that brings us to the final game. And again, Crosby didn't play in that one, and Gensel didn't play in this one. So this was like 3-2 Penguins win in overtime. And then finally they met on Valentine's Day, where Crosby was back, and this was the second game of newly acquired Jason Zucker. Yeah. Who had his first 2 goals as a Penguin in this game. Crosby put up 3 assists. Tristan Jarry was back in goal. So I bring the goalie thing up because we're trying to figure out who's going to be their goalie. Tristan Jarry's back in goal in this game, and he was the story of this game. He stopped 35 of 36 shots, where the Penguins only had 28 shots, but scored 4 goals. Penguins won 4-1. So Jarry outplayed Price. Again, the Habs speed was like all over the Penguins defense, and this was a little bit healthier Penguins team. I mean, defensively they were pretty much all there. This was also Kovalchuk's first game as a Canadian. So it was like one of these things where you had these 2 things happening at once. Shea Weber did not play in this game, so he was hurt. And the last thing I'll say about the Canadiens in this series against the Penguins was this. Nate Thompson, who the Canadiens traded away to the Flyers at the deadline, of course, because the Canadiens didn't think they were going to play in the playoffs, like we talked about before. Nate Thompson was really key in the second and third game of this series. Made like some nice plays. Was really like just probably one of the more solid Habs out there at times, and set up a couple goals. He's not, of course, a member of the Canadiens anymore. So that's what you have as far as the series. So the series in the regular season. And so I want your thoughts, Mike, on what you think what are your thoughts on this series now that we're in the playoffs with everybody healthy? Remember, this is the first time you're going to see Jake and Jason Zucker.
Well, I wanted to start with that because in that instance, not everybody's going to be healthy. Nick Bukestad is out for the season. They just announced a couple days ago that he's going to be out. I think it was Dominic Simone is also out. So, it's not like Pittsburgh's getting everybody back, but I think the big key here is that the players who had just come back before the pause, like Dumoulin, like Marino, Letang had been out for a while. All these guys are going to be well rested and have a chance to be completely healthy, and that I think is going to be extremely beneficial to the Penguins. Now, the thing is, the Penguins are an older team. Yeah, you got a Marlowe who's 40 years old. You've got Crosby and Malkin who are in their early 30s. The benefit of them having that break. Now, everybody's going to be rested. Most everybody's going to be healthy. But for veteran teams, I think it's going to help them more because these teams, these players know how to jump into a certain situation better than younger players. And if they have been able to keep up their physical activity during the pause, then they're going to have an advantage. I mean, this is. I want to get Jan's point of view on this. Mm-hmm. I think this is not going to be even close. I mean, Montreal is not that good of a team. They, in all rights, don't belong in the playoffs because they needed to make it 24. They were going to get in. Yes, you have a great goaltender in Carey Price, who didn't have a great year. He had
he didn't. He actually was better last year when I looked at the stats of this. He was right.
You've got the question mark of whether Max Domi will even play because he's a type 1 diabetic.
people about
Yeah,
that.
so I mean, I look at this series and I'll give Montreal a game. I think it would be, if it's a best 3 of 5, I think Pittsburgh will win in 4. But I see no way unless it's Carey Price of,
So we're talking best of 5 series when you say that. Remember?
Yeah, best of 5 series. I think it'll be Pittsburgh in 4, and I think Pittsburgh, could be one of these teams that is well positioned with everybody rested and healthy, a veteran team that could go a long way. What do you think, Jan?
So a couple of things. So I think the loss of Bukestad and Simone are not huge losses. I think they impact. I think it's more depth than anything else. But I do think the return of Gensel has a bigger impact because they acquired Jason Zucker, as we talked about.
Yeah.
Zucker, Sidney Crosby, and Connor Sheary's been the first line. Marlowe's been filling in the second line. Now, Gensel originally played with Crosby, but I could see him sliding on the line with Malkin and Rust, which then slides Marlowe down. And you can have him on your third line of a Marlowe, McCann, and Hornqvist type of third line.
Right.
A guy like on the fourth line is Zach Aston Reese, who's been kind of an agitative type of presence, physical presence.
Right.
Defensively, overall, I think Pittsburgh is a better defense overall. The names may not be as well known as Shea Weber other than Chris Letang, but you look at what John Marino did this year, you look at what Dumoulin and Pedersen have done, and you look at the history of Justin Schultz gives them, in my opinion, an edge in them defensively, unless somehow Montreal gets Alexander Romanov able to play, and then that does help lengthen their defense a little bit. Between the pipes, I mean, the big debate, as we talked about, Eck, and you said, Mike, also is Jarry versus Murray, right? You can argue you could start Jarry knowing you have Murray in the wings and he's got the pedigree and the experience. But I do think because of that pedigree and experience and the cup championships, you're probably going to go to Matt Murray first between the pipes, knowing that you have Jarry as a fallback option if worse comes to worse. In terms of Montreal, they do get Thomas Tatar back, which is a big thing for them. Yeah. I do think their third line is aided with that depth of Tatar coming back because Nick Suzuki's had a very good year that nobody's really talked about because of all the other fine rookies, but he kind of gets lost in the mix. But Suzuki showed just how good he is and why he was a first-round pick several years ago for Vegas. Getting Tatar back helps them. But in terms of overall, you look at the talent between the two squads, and I agree with you, Mike, that Pittsburgh most certainly has the edge on talent, but also, more importantly, as you did say, they are an older team, right? As an older team, despite the rest, your goal is to get through playoff rounds as quickly as possible so you can have a chance to advance. We saw the Rangers' difficulty in 2015 is they kept going to 7 games. They kept going to extended series, which caused all the – if you look at McDonough was injured that series, that several other defensemen hurt because they kept playing extra games and not getting out of series quick enough. Right. This year, same thing for Pittsburgh and the playoffs or any older team. You've had a break, but you're also going to have a fairly compressed schedule. Yep. You have an extra round that's added in. So your goal is to get through these series, which is with the early one especially, which is minimal effort as possible. So I agree with you. Best of 7, best of 5, I'm going Pitt in 4. Best of 7, I'm probably going Pitt in 5. But the X factor, as you said, is if Carey Price stands on his head, which he has done in the past, that could turn the series, right? If they go up 2-1. The other X factor I'll talk about, everybody said Montreal doesn't belong in the playoffs, right? That's been the big key. If it was a normal year, they wouldn't make the playoffs. If I'm Montreal and I'm a Canadiens fan or I'm an owner, I'm a player, I got a little chip on my shoulder to go, hey, I'm going to show you that I actually do belong in these playoffs, which is going to up their effort level to a certain extent against Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah, nobody in Pittsburgh is going to say that. That's bulletin board material. So you're right. But as we were talking here, I broke it down. Yeah. Since the All-Star break, Matt Murray 11 starts. Yeah. Tristan Jarry 8 starts. Yeah. Murray was 5-1. But he ended on winning 3 of his last 4. I think that the determining factor, obviously, with the fact that he's got 2 cup victories and Jarry doesn't. But I also think if they drop the first game, if they get dropped down 2-0, then they're definitely going to go to Jarry. But if Murray plays badly in game 1, I don't see Sullivan hesitating and going to Jarry because Jarry played great this year and they have confidence in him. But I think Murray will be the guy they start out with. Yeah,
I think Murray's got to be. I mean, Murray just has, he's still young. He's got all this experience. I mean, I wouldn't be now if the games are really tight. Like if they have to play these 5 games in say 8 or 9 days, say 8 days or something like that, where these games are really tight. then they might not have an issue going back and forth a little bit and giving Jari a start. I think that it as long as they're not in trouble in the series.
Well, you make a good point, because I heard the talk of potential scheduling in this 2-hub 12-team scenario, where you could, since these players have been rested for so long, you could have a scenario where a game, like say Pittsburgh and Montreal, they would play a Friday afternoon at 4 and then play a Saturday night at 7. Whereas, usually there'd be most of the time there's a day of rest in between, but since there's been enough rest, they need to get these games in, and that's a possibility. That's a luxury to have basically two number ones. You could see that happen. You could see, there's other teams where you could see the goaltenders being split, like Leonard and Fleury in Vegas.
Yeah, like Leonard and Fleury, exactly. I mean, it depends on, of course, if you're in trouble, you're going to go with the guy that you trust. But if you're heading the series and you feel like your team's playing competently enough, I mean, Montreal doesn't have a whole lot of offense. Although, so we went through the head-to-head stats in depth. Our guy our old former hockey buzzer Travis Yost did some pretty good breakdowns of these teams. Offensively, during the regular season, you would think that the Penguins are a much better team, right? And the ironic thing about that is the Habs were close. When 5-on-5, the Habs were close, I should say. The Penguins were a much better power play team, and this has killed the Canadiens for a couple of years now. I mean, my whole key to the Canadiens this season, when I look back on it in the beginning, was like, this is one of the better teams 5-on-5 in the NHL. Last couple of years, power play wise, they don't get it done. And we know the playoffs, power play and goaltending. Like I've always said, those are the two things. But to me, you have to have good goaltending. You have to be good on your special teams. If you're not, you're in trouble in the playoffs. Bottom line, you're not going to be able to win games if you don't score on your power play.
Well, whenever an underdog comes up against what I would say is a prohibitive favorite, I try to look at it from the underdog's point of view and say, how do they win a series against? How does Montreal win a game win a series against Pittsburgh? One, you need Price standing on his head.
Yeah, the goaltending thing, taking the goal. I mean, the goaltending is always the X factor, right? You can take the goalie out of this, then mute Jen for a second because he's apparently turned into a werewolf. Let me mute him for a second here. Okay, so he's muted. So yeah, that you're right. I mean, goaltending is the big thing. Continue.
But
yeah.
Then you say, okay, you've got two of the best centers in hockey still in Crosby and Malkin. And how can you match up against them? If it's Philadelphia, and we were talking about this, say a Montreal-Philly matchup, okay, Couturier would go against, a Philadelphia-Pittsburgh matchup.
Yeah.
Couturier would go against one of them, and then who's the second matchup? It would be Kevin Hayes against either Crosby or Malkin. In this instance, Kotkaniemi, who's a young player, big player, had a bad second year. He's out for the season, I believe. So he's out. Their centers, whoever they play in their top two lines, cannot shut down Crosby and Malkin.
Yeah.
So all the weight would be on Carey Price. That's what I'm saying. If Carey Price has blue tights and a red cape, then they have a chance. Otherwise, I don't see how, unless Montreal's power play operates at a 40-50% clip. That's why you're looking for sort of an out-of-world type of event. Yeah. And that's why I think they don't have a chance.
So the 5-on-5, very, very crazy close. And even the Hockey News called it a toss-up with offensively between these two teams, which is interesting because I wouldn't say a toss-up because I would say because the Penguins power play is so much better. But
you have to factor the fact that the Penguins lost Crosby for over 20 games and lost Gensel for I think half the season. So
Crosby had this year when he played. This was a really off season for Sidney Crosby in general. He's not like at the some of the stats that Travis Yost was throwing out, the crazy stats. Crosby was way down in his normal.
Jan, would you like a guy in his off year to have, because he played exactly half a season, 41 games. If you multiply that times 2 for what he had 94 points. Yeah. It would be 32 goals, 62 assists.
Yeah.
He had
I mean,
six.
And he also had 30 points in 24 games after he came back from his injury. So remember, part of that's got to be discounted.
Yeah.
That he was playing through the injury initially,
right.
and then he was more closer to
Right.
his normal self.
For
So
sure. You know, and
that has to be factored in. And now you would think he's fully healthy, because even if he attempted to rush back a little bit, he's had probably it'll be 3.5 to 4 months to rest to get back to his normal self, going into a playoff run where, as you said, Mike, everybody's rested. Everybody starts basically from scratch.
And
a guy who's an elite player who's fully rested, stepping into a potential playoff run.
And when you made your breakdown of the lines, game 1 of this series will be the first game that Gensel and Zucker play together. That can't be underestimated, because Zucker played very well for them after he got traded from Minnesota. I'm just looking up his stats right now. 12 points in 15 games.
Very well with Crosby too.
Yeah, right. That's pretty good.
Zucker historically has been, like, go back to his junior year. Remember, he was like an unbelievable big game player. So that was he's a playoff guy, like, through and through. That he is definitely one of those guys who plays better in big games. It's tough to discount that. I mean, this is as deep as the Penguins offense has been going into the playoffs for a very long time, honestly. I mean, if they're all healthy, this is when you consider that Rust had the season he had too, and you finally have a guy, Rust had like 58 points or something like that.
56
points. He really, Malkin had one of his best years too. So, and that has a lot to do with Rust. The two of them were so you finally found somebody who could maybe play with Malkin all the time. That's a big deal too. So you got two lines. The top two lines for the Penguins are just unmistakably awesome. But then when you get beyond that, that when you get to the third and fourth lines, the teams kind of are even more even. Like Montreal basically, as I've said before, is like a team that has like 2 second lines and 2 third lines. They don't really have a first line, but their third line and fourth line are not. They can compete, and they're fast. They're young and they're fast. For what it's worth, they are that. So they will test the defense. Like, how often do you have to play? Jack Johnson and things like that. If you're Pittsburgh, you're going to have to deal with this. The speed of the Penguins is going to be a factor.
Well, I was gonna bring Johnson up because honestly, I don't know whether Johnson gets in the lineup in this series. If you look at the Pittsburgh blue line, they have Schultz back, Dumoulin's back, Marino is back. Yeah. I don't know whether it's Letang, Schultz, Peterson, Dumoulin, Marino. You need one more defenseman. Could it be a Ricola? Could it be a Chad Ruedel? I mean, we know that Johnson is limited, and you don't have to justify, the fact that you signed him to a 5-year contract. He's not. They sat him out in the playoffs last year, so they could sit him out again. And I don't know if that would be a mistake or I'd be the right move, but they could do it again.
Yeah, no, they definitely could. And I mean, the one thing I'll go back to with the Penguins, having watched the Penguins, as Jan has, we've seen the Penguins plenty. The thing about the Penguins is that they are, and I always say this, and that very few people pick up on this for some reason, but I really do believe this because I've really analyzed the Penguins. I mean, I've covered them through Stanley Cup playoffs. I've covered them in the Stanley Cup finals when, they are a counterattack team. That's what they like to do, and they do not want to attack you. They are not a team for all their skill. They're not like, I was watching the Oilers-Flames game I told you the other day, that the Oilers just flat out attacked. They were an attack team back then. They had all the talent, they had all the speed, and they just attacked you. The Penguins are better as a counterattack team. They would rather you come at them and then break off the counters, and then off the counters, get these like opportunities, like the 2-on-0s, the 3-on-1s. That's what the Penguins are best at. They are best at breaking up the play at their own blue line or at the center ice line, and then taking it in on rushes. That's where they're most happy. I mean, they aren't a really great cycling team, Crosby excluded. Crosby's a great cycling, like probably one of the best ever. But besides him, you won't see Malkin cycling as much as he should for his size. So the issue here, to me, that's going to come up is, how are the Canadiens going to play them? If the Canadiens attack them, like straight up attack them with their speed and stuff like that, that plays right into the Penguins.
Yeah. Well, you know how Montreal is going to – okay, this is the one advantage that Montreal has is the fact that Claude Julien is a shutdown coach.
Right.
He's played that type of game throughout his entire pro career when he was a coach in New Jersey, when he was a coach with Boston, obviously, and now with the Habs.
Yeah.
Their only hope is to try to suffocate the Penguins with checking. If they have a decided speed advantage to try to neutralize them coming up the middle, they're probably going to try to play some sort of trap.
Yeah.
And if you limit them to a 2-1, 3-2 game, maybe guys like Crosby and Malkin and Gensel and Zucker get frustrated because they can't break out and they can't flash their offense. But trying to do that, it may be easier in a best 3 or 5, but trying to do that and get 3 victories out of that, you're going to have Price making 50-plus saves.
Right.
Plus, also look at the personnel on that team, right? I'm not sure if that team is situated to be a shutdown kind of a team, especially if you look at the makeup of the first couple lines, right? Jonathan Drouin is not a shutdown type of player. Thomas Tatar is not a shutdown type of player, right? You have certain guys that can play that role, but you look up and down that lineup, and it's not a team that strikes itself as having that offense-defense balance where they could easily transition or have the history of being strong defensive players. There's a handful of them, but the problem is you'd be enacting a system that doesn't necessarily fully suit your personnel, even though that might be the best way to beat the Penguins.
Yeah, you're talking about head-to-head Crosby Malkin versus Max Domi and Philip Deno.
But let's go back to like what you said before. Your coach Julien is not. I mean, he always had. Of course, in Boston he had Patrice Bergeron, who's one of the best defensive centers in the world, and has been for a decade. But he also spends a lot of time. Boston, when you played against Boston, the thing that people would always say is Boston is going to match defense against your offense. That's what Boston did really well. Like they would get Chara out there against the right people. McAvoy.
Weber will be playing 30 minutes.
Right. Weber is going to be a huge key. He's going to have to, and I think how he's going to look at it, he's going to be like, yeah, you can't match center against center. You would rather probably get Domi if you can, just try to give him a chance to create offense and not let him worry about creating defense, because you're going to have to create offense.
Well, and Jan, the one area where I think Montreal has an advantage over Pittsburgh is in professional blank disturbers, because they've got Domi who's expert at getting under people's skin. It must be in his DNA. And we know they've got the best rat in the league in Brendan Gallagher. Yep. And, they've got a couple other players who are adept at getting underneath.
He can get under your nerves also a little bit.
Yeah, if he plays, but the point being is, if they goad Pittsburgh into power and into penalties, then their power play with Weber with his big shot from the point is going to have to operate at a really high clip. It's not impossible, but I just don't know if they can get enough out of their, I think, limited talent to overcome the discrepancy in talent between the two teams.
Well, there's we talked about, and we've kind of laid out what the blueprint is. The problem is the ability to follow that blueprint to a T, right? You can't have any bobbles. You can't have any missed assignments. I wouldn't say you're playing a perfect game, and because with Price back there, you have somebody that can clean up your mistakes. But you look up and down that blue line as comparison, and you're like, nothing. Look, Weber, Chariot, Petrie's good, but you look at the rest of that lineup and you go, that defense isn't striking fear into the hearts of anyone, especially when you get down to the third pairing potentially.
Yeah, here. I mean, after Weber and Petrie, you're talking Carl Alzner probably will not play because he was down in Laval for most of the year. But you're talking Ben Sherratt, Victor Mete if he's healthy, Xavier Ouellet, Brett Kulak, and Christian Folin. Yeah, not exactly Savard, Robinson, and Lapointe.
If I'm Julien though, being that you're playing Pittsburgh, I'm playing Alzner. I'm going to find if he can. I'm going to look at him in practice. I'm going to see what he's all about. But he is a guy who has played plenty of games against the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yep. Yes, but he's painfully slow.
He is painfully slow. But if he's also pretty damn smart, and he knows kind of defenseman that knows the Penguins, and he's going to get out there, and he's the kind of guy who Crosby and Malkin don't want to go into a corner with. You know what I mean? He's going to mess them up, and they know that. And you need to have Crosby and Malkin looking over their shoulder a little bit. You need to have them a little bit nervous about the corners. And the problem with Canadiens defense, like you talk about guys like Victor Mete, there's no physicality in there. No. He's like a Shane Gostisbehere type player to me. I mean, he's got all this, plenty of offensive upside, but there's nothing defensively.
And I think this is the reason why you've heard the name of Alexander Romanov so much because I
Right.
think that Bergevin and Julian will play him in a playoff series if they can, because I think they're, and I'm not saying in a top 4 role. I'm not saying paired with Petrie or paired with Weber, but on their bottom pairing where I think it's practically AHL caliber. If the option is to play a 20-year-old Alexander Romanov who can skate versus a 30-something-year-old Carl Alzner who can't, they'd rather play Romanov.
Absolutely, 100%, which is why that's another X factor if he is eligible to play.
Right.
Yeah.
And we won't know that until the NHL makes that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you also have to factor in here, and this is why we got into our little tete-a-tete because of, Montreal maybe not wanting to be in the playoffs. The mindset of Bergevin. He traded Marco Scandella. He was smart too. He got a 2nd-round pick after giving up a 4th-round pick. But they traded Scandella.
Which obviously they would right back right now.
Right. They traded Ilya Kovalchuk, who scored for them. Now he didn't score. He didn't score for Washington because he's in a different role. But he was playing first power play and top 6 minutes with Montreal. So they traded They traded Nate Thompson, who was a decent role player on the 3rd or 4th line. They expected to not make the playoffs. Them being here without those players puts them at a greater disadvantage.
But I think even if they did expect to make the playoffs, you still could argue that they might have traded those guys for the lack of expectation to go far in the playoffs, right? The point was getting assets for the future as opposed to the percentage shot of with those guys being able to go a round or 2 in the playoffs.
True. I mean, I think that, the odds are definitely way in the Penguins' favor because, the Penguins, if they're all healthy here, have a dangerous team. I mean, they have a team that could potentially win it all. I mean, they really do. If they're in the right frame of mind, they could. Now, the problem with the Penguins saying that very clearly is that this Penguins team, more than like any Penguins team in recent memory, for the last couple years, this Penguins team has been very soft mentally. Like there have been times when the Penguins have gone in really bad slumps, and there have been times when they played really well. But they can look terrible. Like this Penguins team has the ability to look terrible more than the teams that
they looked mentally fragile for most of that series against the Islanders last year. The Islanders dominated them, and I don't know if that maybe it's the effect of finally the bubble bursting and them losing to Washington a few years ago.
Yeah,
and their machismo evaporated. But if you're looking at a pure I don't think that pertains to this series because I think that the difference in talent is so dramatic. I mean, if they lose to Montreal, and lose to Carey Price, who we remember the Larry Brooks column is saying that playing against Carey Price is unfair to some teams. Like, okay, he's a great goaltender, but he can't do it all on his own. Yeah. And he probably would have to do it all on his own to be able to win this series. That's why I think it's almost impossible.
It is, but he is the kind of goalie that can break a mentally unstable team. Like
sure.
If they get shut out in game 1 and then they can't score through 2 periods of game 2, like that kind of stuff. You're looking at things like that where, that's where this team and Sullivan, for some reason, and I think the problem is that they're more talented than they've been before, but they haven't replaced some of the players that really were keys for them as far as just the kind of guys you need to win. Like the 3rd and 4th liners they need to win. They've replaced them with more talent and less grit, like you said. Like Montreal's grittier, for sure.
But I mean, I grant that point. But if you do look at Pittsburgh's depth at forward, you're talking about guys like, Connor Sheary could play on a top 6 line with Pittsburgh because he did when they won 2 cups, but more than likely he's going to be a 3rd line guy. Evan Rodriguez, who they got from the Sabres late before the deadline, he could be a 4th line guy. Aston Reese could be a 4th line guy. That's not bad. Those are, and I'm trying to think of who.
How much are they going to? The question is how much. Like they haven't had a whole lot of time to integrate those players in. Like they from the trade deadline until now. And remember, the Penguins were struggling badly when this all ended. Like they weren't they one of the teams that barely won a game from the trade deadline. If I remember right, I'm trying to remember. I know
Carolina was one that team.
The Islanders were really bad. The Islanders were really bad.
Yeah.
But
Pittsburgh won 3 of their last 4 going into the playoffs.
Okay, they won 3 of their last 4. A guy like Teddy Bluger, who's just a really hardworking guy. Yeah. That's a typical fourth. I mean, their fourth line isn't the caliber of some other teams like say Tampa Bay, but it's not bad. Montreal's is significantly worse. Yeah.
If Dale Weiss plays in a playoff scenario, then Montreal's is worse.
Dale Weiss is painfully slow.
Yes.
I think the key will be, if I'm them, making sure that either Jarry or Murray is going to be solid like that. The problem sometimes having 2 goalies, two goalies, you can have no goalie at the same time. If you don't, someone in the playoffs has to take over. I think you can play these other guys, but someone has to be the guy that you have confidence in. I think that's got to be Murray because he's just done it before. For now, but if he struggles and Jarry goes in, and then Jarry struggles, that's when things like having 2 good goalies suddenly becomes a nightmare, because then you don't know where to go. You're questioning what to do, and your players. I mean, I think the players at the end of the day on this team trust Matt Murray more, and just because he's done it, and
which I find ironic, because, and we'll talk about this after the season.
Yeah,
but there have been an inordinate amount of rumors about Matt Murray being traded, and I understand the reason why, because Matt Murray, coming off 2 Stanley Cups, in spite of his struggles and his injuries, is probably going to get about $6 million on a new deal.
Yeah,
2 years away from being an unrestricted free agent, whereas Jarry, with 1 good half season, probably they can get him signed for $3 million for 2 or 3 years. It's more financially beneficial for them to keep and sign Jarry and trade Murray, because they could lose one of them in the expansion draft.
I tried really hard to look at the 2 goalies, because I watched them both play, and like I said, Jarry played 2 of the games I watched. Murray played the middle game.
Right.
And Jarry was hot, he was coming off this great streak, so he was really looking confident in the first game. But then, once he gave up the first goal, he definitely he let up 2 goals really quickly after that. So he went from this streak to they were almost being pulled in that game. And that's the kind of thing that you worry about with a young goalie, right? Because he could be really good, and then suddenly in the playoffs, if he gives up a couple goals. That's where Matt Murray never collapsed in the playoffs. No. And that, to me, Jarry kind of collapsed in that first game against Montreal. Now, like I said, the third game, he was the story. He was amazing.
Yeah.
But that's so I think, but I still think
before Jan has to drop off, just give us your prediction, Jan.
I said 4. If it's best of 5, Pitt in 4, best of 7, Pitt in 5. The X factors being if Price reverts, turns back the clock, as the price of several years ago, then they have a shot. But I think Pittsburgh overall has too much talent.
Yeah, I agree exactly with Jan. About a 4 if it's a best of 5 series, 5 if it's a best of 7.
I'm going to go with Pittsburgh in 5 if it's best of 5, and I think that it's the kind of thing where I could see. I would, there's so many times when everybody says that there's no way that Montreal is so obviously the underdog. Whenever we see that, have we not learned?
Well, yeah, it's not impossible. I mean, I remember for Sabres fans out there of my generation, the name Eddie Stanowski is something that brings them horror, because Eddie Stanowski was a goaltender who was not particularly, didn't have a particularly good NHL career, but he played for St. Louis in the mid-'70s. He played a first-round series, I think it was 77 against the Sabres, and he stoned them blind for 2 games and 4. I think it forced it to a 3rd game before the Sabres, with the French connection, beat them. Yeah. If you have a hot goaltender, and we know Price can get hot, then everything equals out. But I just think that Pittsburgh is good enough to overcome even a red-hot Carey Price.
I think they are too. That's why I say 5 games, even if they lose the first one, which I could see. It feels like the kind of thing that would be set up for them to possibly lose the first one. And if it's a 7-game series, I would say Pittsburgh in 6. I think that, I don't see Montreal necessarily taking the 7, but I could see Montreal taking it to 5 in a 5-game series. And if you get to game 5, that is terrifying for the Penguins. I mean, there's no 2 ways about that. you're playing a game 5 in a best of 5 in a best of 3 series against the Montreal Canadiens with Carey. That's when Carey Price becomes a much bigger deal, because if in one game or one period or whenever you need to score that goal, then you're going against Carey Price. That's where it becomes a problem. Overall, Price is not nearly the dominant player he was before, but then again, at the same time, he is playing in front of probably the worst team he's ever played in front of or behind in Montreal. Like this as far as defensively goes, this Montreal Canadiens team is horrific. And they are, and so for Price's numbers, it's kind of hard to say, has Price really fallen off that much, or is it really just the fact that he's getting, when you look at the chances he gives up in these games, like you watch the game, it's like Price is making some amazing saves. But remember, Price's strength is not like the acrobatic save thing. It's that he is always in position to make any, he doesn't give up bad goals. Like that's Price.
No. And
Jari, on the other hand, in that game where he gave up 3 goals, 2 of the goals he was badly cheating off the post for looking at the pass. It was the kind of thing like, okay, you can't do that in the NHL and get away with it too often. So, yeah, to me, it's going to be it's one thing this series does have over all the other series is ratings. I mean, this is a television rating. This is a fantastic series for ratings. That's why I call it the must-see TV series, because the Montreal Canadiens obviously have as many viewers as the rest of the league sometimes put together. In their it's just crazy. They've got two networks covering them in 2 languages, 2 different medias going around, and then you've got Sidney Crosby, who is one of the most popular players in the world, and usually popular player in Canada. So you're going to have like Hockey Night in Canada. This is the dream series for Hockey Night in Canada.
Well, yeah, I think so, because Crosby from Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
you have the Canadiens, so you have the province of Quebec. There's a lot of Canadian players on the Penguins. I think it'll probably be a series that is prime time on NBCSN in the States and prime time on Hockey Night in Canada for the days. Like, they will not want Montreal and Toronto playing on the same nights. That'll be right. They'll make sure they alternate them, because they'll have the Leafs and Columbus on one night and Montreal on the other night, and then in the second half they'll have Vancouver, Minnesota, and Calgary, Winnipeg, and then Edmonton, Chicago on other nights to be able, or at the second half, so they have the
Oh yeah, I think the Edmonton series will be Edmonton Chicago is another big time rating series, but and that will be fun. We'll get to that one for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, tomorrow we're going to talk about the Sabres and what the Sabres need to do in the offseason, which is going to be a lot to talk about. So
Joe Yerdon was on the conference calls with Jason Botterill and Ralph Kruger and all the Sabres players, as I was, and so we'll be able to talk about that, and not just about that, but just what the direction of the franchise should be, because I've been talking about the Sabres and what they need to do, and I think the level, the comments of Eichel and the level of frustration that he showed in those comments better be a wake-up call to Terry and Kim Pegula, because you're another bad year away from him. And I haven't heard this from anybody. This is only my personal opinion. If they have another year like they did this year, he can like Ralph Kruger as much as he wants. He can think that this team is talented. He's going to ask for a trade. Another bad year like this, he's going to ask out.
Yeah.
And this organization is in deep trouble if he does that.
Yeah. It's one of those things, though. I know Eichel pretty well. I don't see it in his character to ever. I think he's the captain that goes down with the ship. And I think that part of what he's saying here, his passion is because of that. His passion is because he's not going to ask for a trade. His passion is because he knows this is where he's going to play his NHL career. And if they don't get it together, he's going to have a bad NHL career. And I think that's how he sees it, because he's not the kind of guy who runs away from it. He's not the kind of guy who says, I'm
not saying he's a quitter, because he's not, but I'm saying, he's 20. He'll be 24 at the end of next year. He will have used up 6 years of his NHL career after next season. If he hasn't played one playoff game at that point, if the organization is in turmoil after missing the playoffs again, because if they miss the playoffs again next year, Jason Botterill's fired. Yeah. Ralph Kruger is probably fired. You have a new general manager, a new head. It'll be the 4th head coach that Eichel has had if they fire everybody next year after another bad season. So we'll definitely talk about that with Joe.
Yeah, we will for sure. And to me, what gets Eichel traded would be only if they just think that if he becomes so angry about everything that they feel like they have to move him out. But he's not gonna be the kind of guy who says who asked for that trade. He's not gonna
Right.
that's not him. I just don't see it. I mean, he's just too much of a stand-up guy and too much pride and too much and just he's really, I mean, he's really one of the better character guys I've ever met. And I think that that's why when I see him talk like that, it should mean something. Like, this is for him to say that kind of stuff, for him to actually come out and be critical like that. It should mean something. I mean, this guy, I was always amazed by Jack Eichel and his ability to handle the McDavid thing when it was him and McDavid. He just handled it with such unbelievable class. And he's equally, not equally to McDavid, but he is definitely a generational player who came out the same year as just happened to come out the same year as Connor McDavid. Like, if you put him in any other draft, Jack Eichel is probably the top guy taken. And he's that good. So
yeah. And Funky in the chat says, how do you think Dylan Larkin feels? Well, at least Dylan Larkin played 5 playoff games in his rookie season.
Yeah.
Jack Eichel was drafted the year after. He was drafted in 2015. Larkin was drafted in 2014.
Yeah.
Larkin played 5 playoff games for the Wings in the 16 playoffs. Eichel has played now 4 pro seasons and has not played 1 playoff game.
Yeah, and that's this is both are obviously good hockey towns in Buffalo and Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Both are ready to get back. Both want to get back to the playoffs. It feels as if I'm Larkin, I understand the plan better.
Right.
In Detroit, then Eichel sees the plan in Buffalo. That to me is the big difference. There is Larkin knows that they've been bringing up guys systematically. They've been making signings.
Wait. There's a plan in Buffalo?
Yeah, in Buffalo, not so much, right? So that's yeah, and that's
I'm being sarcastic.
It's a sin. No, it's a sin. It's a sin because the Buffalo fans are like literally, that I always said for years, like I felt the same way about the Islanders. For years, the Islanders fans were just getting hosed, and because the Islanders fans are such good fans. Now the Islanders have a team that's they got a coach and they got a team that can play, and it'll be interesting to see how they do in these playoffs. They'll be a fun one to talk about, But yeah, I think that at least they got back to the playoffs. They actually won a series. They're an interesting team again. The Islanders are, and the NHL is a better league when Buffalo Sabres are in the playoffs. They're the kind of team that you won in the playoffs for sure. And it just hasn't happened at all. There hasn't been any hope. And there was such great hope for so many years with Buffalo before this. They came out of such a good run before things went bad that it really makes it even harder, I think, for them, for fans up there. So yeah, I'm hoping. I would like to see them play somebody interesting. So we will talk more tomorrow. Like I said, we'll talk about the Sabres tomorrow. Also, it's funny. So I'm looking at some. If you guys any questions in the chat room, by the way, we could talk. We could deal a couple of questions. We have a little bit of extra time here.
Somebody said I look younger in the chat. I don't know what they're talking about.
Well, someone's girlfriend wants to meet you in the chat. I don't know.
Well, if she's
your girlfriend, I don't know if the Mike's that.
Yeah, no, sorry. No. He said that she likes me. Probably my personality, I think that's high level of intelligence. The fact that I like Tang.
Always being so positive. I think all that stuff. Yeah, I think that's definitely. So we'll see. If maybe she's got a friend or something. Anyway,
remember without the buzz.
I like Timothy Park, who writes in here. Hopefully Russ will be back tomorrow. Like, Tim, were we that terrible? I mean, I know Russ is amazing, but is that what you guys say when I'm not here?
That's funny.
Russ will be back tomorrow. It's fine. Russ has Russ has a rare day off. He's a soldier. Mike and Russ are soldiers. Potential coaches for the Devils, Christopher Patton asks us.
Gallant.
Gallant obviously is out there, right? And that's a big name, but we still got to get the freaking GM thing figured out. Is it just Tom Fitzgerald? It feels like it is. Just say it is. If they're interviewing coaches like they interviewed Gallant, they interviewed Pierre McGuire apparently, right?
Yeah, that's the NHL's version of the Rooney Rule. You have to interview Pierre McGuire at least once.
Do we believe that they interviewed McGuire? I guess they did, but
I heard it, but I don't know if it's true or not.
Because in the past, sometimes that teams have been rumored to interview Pierre McGuire and they haven't. So
I wouldn't doubt that a guy like Mike Fuda would get an interview. A few other common names out there that, but I haven't heard anything. I would think that Fitzgerald would get the job, but if that's the case, why haven't they taken the interim tag off of him in the 3 months since the pause?
Yeah, and I know that there were issues between Fitzgerald and the ownership there at times, but they seemed to work that out. And I heard things were getting better, and the ownership was happy with all the draft. I mean, Fitzgerald made a lot of trades, got a lot of picks, got a lot of things done.
The Blake Coleman deal was a good deal.
Yeah.
So I think he does. I think from the outside looking in, he deserves the job, but we'll see.
Yeah, he's got he definitely deserves a shot at this shot. I think to take it a little bit further at least. I wouldn't maybe go super long with him, but I think that you put. I mean, I think he's a solid. But can seven non-playoff teams. This is from Funky Coast. Can 7 non-playoff teams make trades with each other? And yes, the answer is yes. Actually, every team can make trade with each other right now.
No, the playoff teams can't.
Did they say they can't?
They cannot make trades. Only the 7 teams can trade.
Is that different this year?
Yeah.
Oh, they came out and they said that.
Yeah, no. I mean, well,
in general, everybody can always make trades. They can't play the players that they can trade.
I looked it up when during the pause. There was no trades were allowed because it was after the trade deadline and before the season. Now you have to be eliminated. Now that means the 7 teams. So Buffalo could trade with Ottawa or Detroit with. Once the 8 teams are eliminated from the play-in round, they can trade. Once you're eliminated, you can trade. Remember that deal between Vancouver and Florida?
Right.
I remember during the Calder Cup playoffs a few years ago, the Gabranson, that deal. That happened in May, and they were both eliminated from the playoffs. But teams that are active still in the play-in round or in the playoffs, no, they can't.
Okay. Because how it's always been told to me is that teams can always make trades. It's just a matter of whether or not you can play, whether or not the player is qualified. Like the trade deadline is not about ending trades, and even though it does, but it's about like ending ending players. If you pick up a player, you can't play him. So
I thought it was like that too. I thought it was like baseball because baseball has they changed this now, but they had the waiver and the non-waiver trade deadline in July and August, and teams that needed to make a trade, they could still make a trade. It's just that the player would not qualify for the playoffs.
Yeah,
but either that was changed in the NHL.
That's been changed recently because
I mean, from what I understood,
we'll find out for sure, but that's something we should know. But I think that absolutely does. It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that you can do that if you're still playing. I don't think you should be able to make trades if you're still going, but sometimes teams will talk about like draft pick trades and stuff like that you could move around. But actual players, you should be able to trade. Will85 wants to know who will be John Tavares' line mates. Mike, what do you think?
Oh, well, at the end of just before the pause, they had moved Nylander back with Matthews, and they had moved Marner back with Tavares. I think they'll stick with that. The question is who the left winger will be.
Yeah.
With Mikheyev back, I think they liked the way he was playing on the left side. They had just moved him into a top 6 role before he had the wrist laceration, so he could be one. I don't think they're going to put Kasperi Kapanen. It'll be Hyman on one of the top 6 lines and probably Mikheyev on the other one. The wild card could be Nick Robertson, their big prospect, the second-round pick. But I don't think they're going to put him in that kind of a primary role at age 19. They have too much talent up front. So I would say, if I had to guess, it'd be Hyman with Matthews and Nylander and Mikheyev with Tavares and Marner.
Hey, see, I would definitely play Kapanen with those guys.
There was a significant drop in his performance level playing on the off wing. He's a right wing.
All right, okay.
Yeah, not a left wing.
You definitely want to have somebody who's smart two-way player with those two guys because
his speed is incredible. But it was leaps and bounds. He was a worse player playing on the left side than he was on the right.
Interesting. All right, that's good to know. All right, that's all the questions I see in the chat room as of now. We will be back again tomorrow, guys. Please stay safe out there and try to keep your mood up as much as you can. I know it's hard and things are crazy right now. But remember, at the end of the day, most of us in this world and on this planet and in this country all agree on mostly everything mostly everything. And there's some things that, of course, that people don't agree with, but we all agree with a lot of things. Think about it for a little bit. All right.